Hello, and welcome to part 6, the final part in this series, and today we're going to be talking about how I draw wrinkles, ruffles, and folds. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm not going to be talking about shoes at all in this video, only fabric. Maybe later down the line I can make a video on shoes, but for now, we're just talking about clothes. Now, I do think it's important to mention that I am not a very fashionable person. For some reason, I just could never think of outfit ideas. So usually I like to browse Pinterest, or I'll even base some outfits off of the clothing that me or my friends own. Something that I know works and that I like. But I've also seen other artists collect fashion books, and I think that's a really great idea. They have these beautiful books that are full of a lot of photos and illustrations of men's and women's fashion through the centuries, and I think that's a really great source of reference and inspiration. I've actually been meaning to get some myself, I just haven't gotten around to it, but I feel like just having a book like that with reference of again, fashion through the centuries, but also just photos of the clothing and the fabric that you can reference whenever you need it, I think that's a really valuable thing to have. So I do recommend looking into books like that. So the first thing we're going to start with actually is a basic motion for drawing ruffles. So you have your classic ruffles here, and I think that if you have a good understanding of this process, then you'll be able to draw pretty much any type of clothing or fabric or fold. So first I'll kind of show you the step-by-step process for how I drew this, and then we'll draw it together, and then we'll talk about how this can apply to other situations. So the first thing that I start with is this almost puzzle piece shape where they kind of come up and down. It's like a zigzaggy puzzle piece shape all the way across. And then you add these kind of curved lines that are tapering up towards the top. They start at the edges of these puzzle pieces and then get a little bit thinner as they get towards the top. And then the most important part, at least I think in my opinion, is adding these lines that kind of indicate the fabric that's going behind what's in the front. So essentially this little puzzle piece is a ruffle, and these two lines here that are going up and behind it are showing you that there is fabric that is curved around itself, and that the fabric continues even behind this front piece. So let's go ahead and try to draw this just offhand real quick. So again, let's go ahead and start with that basic puzzle piece shape. I'm not going to worry about making this perfect, I'm kind of just showing you the movements for it. So then we have those curved lines coming up that kind of taper towards the end, because the end of this is going to be wherever the edge of your fabric is or wherever the seam is, because the seam is obviously what is causing these wrinkles and these ruffles, because usually they have a pleat happening. At least that is what I believe is happening. I'm not a fashion or clothing expert, so I could be wrong. But so you're imagining that your seam is here, and that is kind of what's causing these pleats and these ruffles. So then we'll want to finish the piece of fabric. And again, even if there's a piece of fabric that is folding behind something in front of it, you'll want to continue that line to give the illusion that there is a pleat here. So we'll continue that. You might see a little bit there. Continue that. It's mostly, the way that I've drawn it, it looks like it's mostly on this side that you'll see that behind fabric piece, if that makes sense. Except for maybe right here. But we'll go ahead and draw a little bit there. So this particular ruffle that I've drawn is pretty sloppy, but if you get comfortable and you practice this process, you can start varying the ruffles with the shapes and the sizes to make it look a little bit more realistic. And I feel like that will better prepare you for drawing all kinds of different fabrics, because this specific look can be used for tons of different situations, like if you have long fabric hanging down from either a dress or a jacket or a cape, you're gonna kind of have those motions where the fabric kind of billows. It's very difficult for me to describe, but I hope you understand what I'm getting at. So here's a better version of some ruffles that I drew with just a little bit more time. You can see that I really varied the shapes of the ruffles, the sizes, and also they're kind of going at different angles. So it almost looks like you have a center point right here and the fabric is almost curving. because the way that these ruffle shapes or whatever are curving away from the center is kind of alluding to that. So if you compare that to the quick ruffle shape that we just drew, it is essentially the same idea. It's just that I spent more time on this and I'm more comfortable with it. So if you get comfortable with this kind of shape of the ruffles and the idea of like how they work, it'll be a lot easier to draw more realistic ruffles. And again, you can apply that to different situations. As another example, here is like a piece of fabric. I don't know what's going on with it. Somebody's holding it or it's hanging on something. And you're gonna kind of have that ruffle shape appear at the bottom here. It's not quite exactly like this, but there are a few pieces at the end here that have that almost same curved shape, and then you can see the shape of fabric going behind that curve. So this is kind of what I mean when I say if you get comfortable drawing this, you'll be able to apply it to all sorts of situations. So I have a body here and I drew a dress over her. And again, you can kind of see that familiar ruffle shape right here where the fabric is hanging down off of the knees. And you can almost see it around the shoulders where there's some loose fabric hanging here on the sleeve. However, the difference is I imagine this fabric is a lot heavier, and so you don't really see like the puzzle piece shape so much because that fabric isn't lifting so that you can see the underside of it, and it gives you kind of these folds here. But when you have clothing and fabric being worn on the body, things are gonna look a little bit different than just loose hanging fabric. Obviously, this is going to depend on the type of fabric and how tight or loose the fabric is, like on the body. So in this instance, I have this kind of flowy dress, but the character is sitting down and it is a little bit tighter up toward like the waist and chest area. So we have the loose fabric on the shoulders, and then it's kind of hugging the body up until about the waist area, and that's where I imagine the dress is very loose and flowy, but because she's sitting down, it's kind of tucked underneath her legs before it comes down and hangs off there. And when you're drawing wrinkles and folds in fabric, it's kind of important to keep in mind certain tension points. So because of the way that she's sitting, there's going to be quite a bit of fabric overlap right on her lap, and then kind of where her legs bend and the fabric is kind of tucked underneath her, because again, I imagine that this dress is quite flowy, but there's a lot of it that is tucked underneath the legs, so you would see a lot of tension here. And then again, same thing with the lap. A lot of the fabric is kind of bunched up since she is in a sitting position, so there's going to be a bit of tension here. I think the best thing that you can do for yourself, other than just looking up references online, is to take different types of fabric yourself and drape them over your arms, drape it over your legs, drape it over a piece of furniture, and just kind of study the way that it behaves with certain objects. And you'll kind of see what I mean with like the tension points. So when it comes to actually drawing these wrinkles and folds, one thing that I will say is don't overdo it. You don't need to have a whole bunch of wrinkles everywhere to indicate that there are folds in the fabric. In some cases that might work, but for the most part, don't overthink it. And I think something that would be very helpful is to practice drawing loose zigzag shapes. So a lot of Z's and a lot of quick motions like that. Just getting comfortable with these very quick zigzag shapes. Just do something that is very quick and you're just gonna flick the wrist a little bit. So that's kind of what's going on in the lap here, is that there's a bit of a zigzag shape. Another shape that I like to do when you have a bunch of bunched up fabric like this is this, I don't even know what to call this, kind of this, almost like almost like you're drawing like a flower petal or something. I really am struggling to figure out what to call this kind of shape. But basically it just adds some variation in the wrinkles, so you're not just doing the zigzag shapes. I thought that would be easier to explain in my head. I was like, oh yeah, I can explain that. But I really don't know how to explain it other than I like that shape. So that's where I'm gonna leave that one. Let's go ahead and look at another outfit on this body. I'm imagining a pretty comfortable but loose cotton t-shirt and then some jeans here. And again, we're gonna have some of the same tension points. So we have one right here in the lap area where the legs bend, and then also kind of where the sleeve starts and up by the collar. You don't always have this kind of tension here, but depending on the fabric that you're drawing and the way that the body is turned, you might. However, a very common place to have some tension is right by the shoulders and the sleeves. So usually I'll do just a little indication of that on a loose shirt like this. But if we had a tighter fitting shirt, there'd probably be a little bit more wrinkle action going on. And then moving down to the pants, there is quite a bit of wrinkle going on, because with most pants, whether it's denim or anything else, if you are in a sitting position, there's a lot happening up here around the waist. So there's a lot of tension happening with like the seam and the, do you call it like the collar of pants? That doesn't sound right. There's just a lot going on there because that's where your button is, your zipper, and where I would imagine you would have also some belt loops. So you can kind of see this weird shape again that I didn't know how to describe. Again, I really don't know what to call that, but I add that a lot in areas like this, along with, of course, the typical zigzag. And then the wrinkle kind of comes up and over, almost like it would go around. I'm really struggling to describe things to you guys. I'm kind of hoping that this is one of those videos you can just watch me do stuff and be like, yeah, that makes sense. Because I don't think I can rely on words to make sense. And then of course we do have another small tension point here where the legs are bent, so I did do a little bit of zigzag there. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw some sort of outfit on this body. So first thing I'm thinking is long sleeves, and maybe like a collared shirt. So let's add a collar up here. I'm gonna add these first, just because I know that that is where we're gonna see some tension in the fabric. That will kind of help guide me. So I'm also envisioning kind of maybe a belt or something here. Belt loops. So I'm gonna start here. Because her arms are out like this, and I'm imagining kind of almost flowy sleeves, like there's a little bit more bunched up fabric at the end here. There's gonna be a little bit more space coming down because obviously gravity, so most of it is falling off of her arm. So that's kind of the shape I have there. One thing about drawing long sleeves on arms is that you're gonna lose a little bit of that angular look from the arm because the fabric is kind of covering a lot of the joints, so it almost looks a little bit more noodly. You don't have to worry about keeping all of the same angles when you're drawing the sleeves. Okay, so we have kind of more fabric here, almost like one of those bell sleeve situations or something. So because we have this cuff here, and the way that her arm is coming back this way, we know that there's going to be some tension here, and I think the wrinkles would pull towards that direction, just because that's the direction that the fabric is going. I don't really know how to better describe that, honestly. So kind of the same thing here, we'll add a little bit of wrinkle. But let's go ahead and add the rest of the shirt, which I'm imagining is tucked in. So we kind of add these little triangle mountain things because it's pretty loose fabric. It's not super tight on the body, but because it is being tucked in, there's a little bit of bunching happening here. And I'm gonna draw one of those weird shapes that I don't know how to describe because it almost looks like her back is bending a little bit. So there's a little bit more tension here, and then there would be some tension around the armpit area. Maybe even a little by the collar. But that is about all I'm gonna add, really. So let's go ahead and move on to some pants. I'm not sure if I want these to be super loose or not. Maybe like kind of straight pants. So definitely needs to follow a little bit of the curve of the back of the leg because it has to. But when it's kind of falling down like this, it's not really staying right up on the calf or the knee. kind of just falling straight down. So because of the angle of her legs, there's definitely going to be some tension around here. Probably there. I'm also going to draw a seam because we're kind of almost seeing the side of her body here, so there would be a visible seam here. And you don't have to follow it all the way down, but what I like to do is add a zigzag for the seam up where the fabric is bunched, because that kind of helps create that illusion of bunched fabric. And then I'm also going to just draw some indication of pockets here. And more seam right there. And then there's also usually a seam on the inner leg, so you can kind of do the same thing here. So you have your seam and then the outside of the pants there. And that's kind of it, to be honest. I kind of just work at it until I feel happy. So that's body number 1. Let's go ahead and look at this more forward-facing pose, and let's try a different outfit. So I've turned down the opacity on this one. For this one, let's try like a more trendy, like casual outfit, I guess. Sorry if you can hear cars outside. So maybe like one of those outfits where you have a cute graphic tee on top and then long sleeves on the bottom to make it more winter appropriate. I always think that looks super cute, but I've never done it myself. So these sleeves I'm imagining are a little bit less loose than the last outfit. They're kind of hugging the arms just a little bit more. And then let's imagine kind of the belt area. And I'm imagining that long sleeve shirt underneath is tucked in. Some, again, kind of loose pants. Kind of like that. And let's go ahead and add like the button area and where the zipper would be, which is going to be not a straight line down because we know that there's going to be some wrinkles and folds here. I'm also going to add a little bit more wrinkle going on here. And continuing the wrinkle all the way through that zipper seam there. And we know that most of the tension is kind of coming from the way that the pant legs meet up with the waist and like the crotch area. I don't know what else to call it, sorry. So most of the wrinkles are kind of going to go in like a direction up towards the hips, and then in the middle they kind of come down towards the center point of the legs there. There is also usually, if the pants are a little bit looser, where the fabric is kind of coming down around the thickest part of the thigh. But I'm only going to add that to one leg. And because these are pretty loose pant legs, there's really not going to be a whole lot of wrinkle action here because the fabric is, for the most part, just kind of falling undisturbed down the legs. However, because this leg here is kind of turned outward, we are going to see a little bit of that seam. So I'm going to add that. And then of course, we'll add a little bit of wrinkle going on here since this shirt is tucked in. And add some wrinkles here. I'm imagining that they kind of go all the way around the arm. However, we're not going to draw that because that kind of just creates weird looking separation on your character. But we're going to allude to that by adding kind of a curved wrinkle here and then continuing it with like a disturbance on the edge of the fabric here. So kind of adding that little like triangle mountain situation, and then it kind of makes it look like that wrinkle is probably going all the way around the arm, if that makes sense. And then for this shirt, like the top shirt, it's pretty loose, so I'm not going to be adding too much going on there, really just around the bit of folded fabric in the armpit area. We'll add a little collar. With a little bit of wrinkle there. And I think that's pretty much it. There isn't too much wrinkle action happening with the rest of the sleeves, but without overcomplicating it, you can kind of add these ridges at the edges here that kind of make it look like there's some folds or wrinkles in the fabric. So really just kind of focusing the wrinkles around certain tension points, but basically that's it. So let's go ahead and add some clothes to the character that we've been working on and finish her up. So I decided to kind of clean her up just a little bit before I jumped in, and then you'll kind of see me start with an outfit very similar to the one that we just did, because I really liked that outfit. I think it's super cute, but then I was like, well, I don't really want to do exactly the same outfit. I'd like to have some difference. And I kind of remembered that in the beginning of this series, I was almost imagining her in like a puffy sweater or a baggy sweatshirt. So I kind of ended up going that direction. And I did try giving her some cuffed pants, but I wasn't really loving the look of those with that type of sweatshirt that she's in. So I opted for just kind of like some loose, almost straight leg pants, and I like the way that those look. I like the way that it turned out. So you'll see me kind of just adding those same wrinkles and folds that we've talked about in the video. And then towards the end, you'll see me go back over the hair portion of the sketch and just kind of add a little bit of line weight. That's something that I didn't really do in the hair portion of this series because I wasn't really focusing on that. But usually once my sketch or line art is done, I like to add some varying line weight because I feel like it helps it look a little bit more cohesive and a little more complete, and it also kind of gives it a bit more visual interest. But anyway, this has been a long and fun journey with this tutorial series. This is something that I've been wanting to do for years now, and I'm so glad that I finally had the chance to do it. And I hope that it was helpful to some of you. I hope that it gave some of you a little bit of insight as to how I draw my characters. And hopefully over time I'll get a little bit more comfortable with tutorials and explaining my process. But until then, feel free to let me know if there are any other tutorials or videos that you'd like to see from me, and I hope you enjoyed this series. And that is it. It has been a long journey to get here, but we have finally finished our character. She's got this cute, kind of warm, cozy outfit going on. I gave her this kind of loose, long sleeve sweater situation tucked into some looser pants, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I will not be touching on rendering or shading or any of that, so if you are interested in learning how I shade or color, let me know and maybe I can make a separate video series for that. This one was really just to cover the basics, how I sketch a character. Hopefully you have enjoyed all of the videos up until now, and if there is anything in this series that I didn't cover for you or any questions that I didn't answer, please let me know. I would love to make more videos for you. I think I hoped to get a little bit more in depth on some of the things that we talked about, but in order to keep all of these videos at a somewhat digestible length, I kind of had to cut some things out. So let me know if there's anything else that I can cover for you. But for now, I hope that this was helpful for some of you, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye!